The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.
Welcome back to another Director's Chair. The UAB Athletic Director joins us every single week. I'm Mark Ingham right here on Tony Curry Radio. We are blowing and going. We are into springtime, man. Finally starting to get warm out there. We have the big, of course, the UAB. What do we call in the spring? What's the thing? What's the football
Spring
thing?
Showcase.
Spring Showcase. I like everyone. Did you have to have a special meeting to sit down with your group to find out what we were going to call this particular thing? The Showcase. I like the Showcase. So that's
Spring
good.
Fling. Yeah, I'm sure there was a conversation. I don't think it lasted very long, but yeah.
Well, I like it. We got a lot of stuff going on, and before you know it, man, March Madness is over. College football is the next thing we're going to be setting our eyeballs on, and Trent Dilf will be back for his third year, so we're looking forward to another fantastic season. First, though, we got some things we got to clean up. You and I spoke just briefly before evidently a representative out of Washington has come up with the idea. It's this thing called the Restore College Sports Act.
Yeah.
Which basically we have to start somewhere because there has to be some resemblance of who someone knows something that's going on.
Yeah.
There would be the ACSA instead of the NCAA. It would be called the American College Sports Association. There would be a top czar, if you want, to that particular organization. And then at a much smaller level, and at least we're talking about it, there would be like a coach's maximum annual salary would be only 10 times what the full cost of attendance could be. So some of these things are kind of funny, and you talk, but at least we're talking. At least we're talking about it. So it's a good starting point, right? I mean, at least now we've waited probably a little late to start the stuff. But let me ask you this: because when I'm seeing this, I'm like, what's taking? It seems like no one wants to take control of what's going on. And I guess I'm really upset the fact the NCAA, but maybe it's because the NCAA just doesn't have any power. Why didn't someone grab this thing, 2 or 3 years ago before all this stuff started happening and said, listen, here's what's going to go down. Let's set ourselves up, because it seems like everything's an afterthought.
Well, what's happened is the NCAA, and I am one of the people that is not anti-NCAA. The problem for the NCAA is they don't have any support from the federal government to force its members to comply with its own rules.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got all these people that have filed lawsuits against the NCAA, and when the NCAA has simply said, hey, look, you're a member institution, we have rules, you know the rules, and we're enforcing the rules. And then people sue them saying that's unlawful, and there are courts that have upheld and those rulings have forced the NCAA to start changing the way it does things. So all of a sudden, their legs have been cut out from under them to be able to go and enforce them. It's the same as how people complain about the federal government. They complain about Congress or whoever. Nobody knows. You don't really know what's happening up there today, right? And they're all doing stuff, but it's easy to say, oh, I don't do anything up there, whatever, and you don't have a clue. And I think it's kind of hilarious that somebody would introduce a bill to go create a new thing like the NCAA that is basically the exact same thing with a new name.
Yeah.
So the idea that needs to go away and be relaunched, I think, is silly, and I don't think that it would go anywhere. Though there are a few elements, very few elements in what was proposed that I don't think are terrible, and I think if anything, it just is hopefully going to create a conversation that.
What are some of those? What are some of those things that you don't think are particularly?
Well, I mean,
bad?
I think the general concept that we need to be able to enforce our rules. I think that's kind of where they're coming from, and they're trying to create balance, and they're trying to protect some of the Olympic sports, which I'm in favor of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I'm in favor of the way that they would do that, but all of this house settlement stuff basically says we have 3 sports that matter, and it's football, men's basketball, and women's basketball, and everything else be damned. And it's forcing athletic departments all over the country, not small ones, not small budget, big budget departments, to cut funding to their Olympic sports so that they have the money to go spend these revenue share dollars, because we were already spending all the money we have. I don't care if your budget is 30 million or 100 million or 200 million. We spend it. It's
Yeah.
not like we're sitting on, if you've got a $200 million budget, you're not putting 100 million away in reserve and sitting on that like Boss Hog over there with a cigar. You spend it. You spend it on team travel. You spend it on additional staff. You spend it on making sure they have food and clothes and all these things. Like you improve and enhance the experience for the student athlete with that money. So now what people are doing is pulling back on that.
Yeah.
Hey, we don't have a nutritionist anymore, and we don't provide the snacks. We're going to take the money that used to be in a person and the benefits to that person and the granola bars and milkshakes that they made, and we're going to take those dollars and we're going to just put it towards the revenue sharing cap. So you're going to lose a benefit, but you're going to gain the cash.
Yeah. UAB
And people
sport.
are taking, and listen, Tony, they're taking scholarships away from Olympic sports so they have the money to fund the football and basketball rev share.
Yeah. Where is the money coming from? These programs that we know Ohio State, they said they spent $20 million on their football team last year. They paid out $20 million.
Yeah.
Where's the money coming from? Is it just coming from a small group of individuals that at big institutions? But where is this money coming from?
Well, it's two separate things. You're talking about the money they spent last year was through their collective. Moving forward, it's through the revenue share model, which means it has to come from Ohio State. They can still raise money in their collective, or they can have the people that used to give to the collective, they can now give
Yeah,
to.
I mean the money's it's going to be there one way or another, whether it's coming
Yeah.
from the university or
Well,
coming from the collective. So let's just throw all the money in one pot. But where's that money coming from?
yeah, right now it's coming from donors, but in the future, where it's going to come from for people like them is from the college football playoff. The difference here is that the Big Ten schools are all going to get 20 or $21 million more than
Hmm.
they were already getting from the new multiple team,
Oh,
12-team playoff. The Southeastern Conference teams are going to get like 23 or 25 million more per school because of the 12-team playoff. The ACC is getting like 17 million and the Big 12 is getting 14 per school.
hmm.
You know what the group of five is getting? $200,000.
Yeah,
200,000 per school. So when you think about this,
that's
we were
that's ridiculous.
told, yeah, we were
Ridiculous.
told that a year ago when that new contract was signed, hey, there's this lawsuit that the Power Four programs were all named in this lawsuit called House versus NCAA, and they're going to have to pay this huge settlement. And Group of Five, y'all weren't named in that lawsuit, so we, the college football playoff, we're going to give them more money to cover that lawsuit.
Hmm.
Well, it's interesting because the lawsuit wasn't with the college football playoff. The lawsuit was with the NCAA.
Yes.
Then the NCAA decides through the settlement, hey, any conference that has received a distribution from the NCAA, which every conference does through the NCAA basketball tournament, they figured out a formula based on how much you've received to distribute the money and withhold future monies to help pay the settlement.
Hmm.
So we weren't named in the lawsuit, but we became required to pay. So we got hit twice. We got less money from the CFP, and then we were told by the CFP thinking that we weren't going to have to pay in the lawsuit, and then we have to pay in the
They
lawsuit
have all
too.
this. Yeah.
So we're going to pay, UAB is going to pay 417,000 a year for the next 10 years. And to offset that, we're going to get 200,000 more from the CFP.
So you're two
We're
hundred
in the
thousand
whole
dollars in the red. Yeah.
217. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
in the whole 217. But guess what? If you're an SEC school, you might be getting hit with, my 417,000 is a lot of money. Maybe they have to pay 2 million, but they're getting 23.
Yeah.
So
They could be paying 23.
they're fine.
Yeah,
They're fine.
yeah. And thank you for clarifying that. You and I had this conversation. I've gotten several emails here, info at TonyCurryRadio.net, for people to say, this is something no one's talking about. This is one of the few platforms we're actually discussing that, and a lot of people don't think it's particularly sexy or interesting to listen to. I think it is, because it is going to transform sports as we know it. And you probably, as a sports fan, should know a little bit behind what's going on in this instance, because it's going to affect your football team and affect the sports from your favorite college. So, yeah, UAB athletic director. He is the athletic director, Mark Ingram. This is the UAB Director's Chair. We do it every single week right here on TKR. We're doing fantastic, man. Check out our app, TKR app, and just go to our podcast. We're available on every major industry out there, iHeart, iTunes, you name it, we're on it. check it out. And of course, we're doing really, really well. We're going to talk some classic rock here in just a few minutes. I went down to the BJCC. I'm an event guy. As well as I know you are. We've had boxing events, down there at the BJCC, and I've seen you down at some of those things, and whether it be Monster Jams or whether it be NBA preseason, whatever. I like to be part of those things, particularly in the city because we don't have major league sports. To have the Sweet 16 Elite Eight here, I thought was really, really great.
Very cool.
There's no reason why we should not and cannot have the men's situation here, and I think we will. We've got it coming back either next year or the year after. I think it's that round of 32, and it's a blast to know the entire world is setting its eyeballs on Birmingham, Alabama. That's really, really cool. But I got a chance to take in women's basketball for the first time. And I've seen it on television. I've actually seen women's games, but this is the first time I actually got to sit down and really take it in. It wasn't passing. I wasn't walking around watching something else while I was doing it. I got to sat down and really analyze the game. And I was pleasantly surprised how much fun it was. And I like the idea that there weren't so many hand checks and they weren't beating the hell out of each other down the post. And I because I think the men's sport has gotten just so physical. And we saw that in our Final Four, where Florida coach came out saying we got to be more physical, and they were more physical, and then they started getting them fouled. They started fouling them for everything. They had 5 fouls in the first 2 minutes of the second half. They're like, well, what are we supposed to do? I mean, if we're supposed to be more physical, how can we be more physical if you're going to call fouls on it? So I thought it was really interesting. I wasn't real crazy about the fact that we had a blowout in the women's championship, and Gino Auriemma is unbelievable. I mean, he's won 12 national titles, nothing against him, but a blowout there against arguably one of the best coaches in college basketball and the coach here at South Carolina Staley. But what has happened in the last couple of years to make that sport get so big so fast? Is it Caitlin Clark? Is that I can't put my finger on because I was discussing it. We were talking about Hall of Fames, and a friend of mine was like, "I wonder where the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame is going to be." And I said, "Isn't there one?" And he goes, "I don't think so."
It's in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Yeah, I did not know. And he's like, "Imagine how big that thing's going to be in about 10 or 15 years."
Oh, it's gorgeous.
And
It's a big, beautiful facility. It's been there for 20 years.
What has changed? What's happened? And it's great. I mean, I'm super happy. The more sports I'm interested in, if pickleball ends up going there, I try to watch pickleball on TV. I get it. It's funner to watch, or it's funner to play than to watch for sure. Yeah. It's not so it does not do well on television like cornhole. I don't want to. I love playing cornhole, but I don't want to see it on TV. It's
like watching people play cards on television.
Yeah, or bowling. Bowling used to be a big thing on television, and now you know why it's not. It's great to play, but it's really boring to watch.
Yeah.
But women's basketball, now, are there some things that need to change a little bit? Yeah, I love the fact they do 4 quarters. It's different. I like the fact they don't have a 1-and-1. I'm not too crazy about the fact that I did an entire show with Kip Kiefer about the rules of women's basketball because I didn't know. I didn't know it took 4 fouls before you went into the foul situation where you get to shoot the ball. I didn't know there wasn't a 1-on-1. I didn't know that you had all the time in the world to get the ball cross court. You don't have you don't have a 10-second rule there, which I thought was really interesting. You do have a shot clock, but you don't have 10 seconds to get it across the line. So anyway, but why all of a sudden now? What's happening? Tell me from the inside out why it's gotten so big. And I know UAB women's sports has gotten huge too.
Well, the quarter system and those fouls and the free throws, that is time flies, Tony. I want to tell you that's less than 5 years old. Maybe it's 5 years, but it's something like that. It's a relatively new change. I'm sorry that off the top of my head I don't remember the year, but men's college basketball is the only basketball in the entire world at any level that doesn't play the quarter system.
Yeah.
Youth basketball, high school basketball, international basketball, the NBA, all plays.
Why is that? Do you know?
I don't know.
I mean, we got so used to it.
Tradition, I guess. But your question was about women's basketball. One of the things that I think has really helped. So I had the great fortune of working with Pat Summitt at Tennessee, and Tennessee and UConn were the teams to beat at the time that I was working there. Right before, like when I was a student, Louisiana Tech was really good, and Old Dominion was really good, and Stanford was really good. but that was kind of it. And then that was like the top tier, those four or five. And then the next group included Georgia, it included Texas, um,
Notre Dame.
maybe LSU. I don't know if
Yep.
Notre Dame was there quite yet, but here's the point. A friend of mine who was on Pat's staff said to me, and he had been on the men's staff at one point. He said one of the differences is that women's college basketball uh, versus men's. He said if you took a sliding scale and you looked at men's basketball, the very best team in the country to the worst, he said it's this real even kind of slide like this. He said women's basketball is like a shelf. He said
Yep.
we know before the year starts, there's about 4 or 5 of us who could win the whole thing, and then there's a drop, and then it's like another 4 or 5, and then another drop. And he said it's just very different on the talent scale. Well, that was 20 years ago.
There aren't Cinderellas, are there? Are there Cinderellas?
Well, but it has changed. What I was
Yep.
going to say is like when you think about like Iowa. So since he told me that, Michigan State has won the whole thing. Duke has won the whole thing. Iowa didn't, but they were in the finals twice. LSU has won it. Now South Carolina, who used to be
Yeah.
very average, well now
Yep.
they're dominant. So I think there's value in, good for UConn for bouncing back and getting another championship, but I think there's real value in other schools being great. I think Texas is back to being really, really good. Tennessee's not where Tennessee needs to be, but they're really good. They're a Sweet 16 team. Georgia needs to bounce back. They had a coach named Andy Landers there for 30 years who
Mhm.
really made that program what it was. So I think young women are more talented as a whole. There are more talented players out there, so there's more players to go to more schools. When there was only like this is not a joke. This sounds ridiculous, but what Pat used to do in recruiting was she would say, "Okay, I need a post player, I need a guard, and I need a wing."
Mhm.
And this was before all the transferring, so you'd only need 2 to 4 players a year. She would look at the top 10, and that's all she would look at, the top 10 players nationally, and she would go recruit the very best players in the position that she needed outside out of the top 10. She didn't look at you if you were number 11 or worse.
Yep.
You didn't get a conversation. You didn't get so much as a postcard, nothing. And that's what, but she knew she could get them. Well, now they could go to maybe 10 different places where it used to be like three.
Mhm.
And so, now I think the facilities are better. There's more emphasis on the sport. There's a lot of great coaches, so I think there's a lot of good things happening. And you mentioned Caitlin Clark. You have generational players like that that create and change the interest too. It matters.
It is I mean, it really is incredible how fast it's turned around. I mean, because we've been talking, I mean, it reminds me a little bit of soccer. We've been talking about soccer ever since I got here 30, 40 years ago. And we've said it's never getting out. I still don't think it hasn't turned. I mean, we're talking about it more. And of course, we talk about the cup more, a lot more, and the World Cup. And so, I mean, it's a hell of a lot bigger than it was 10 or 15 years ago, but women's basketball turned on a dime. I mean, like just in the last 3 or 4 years, and Caitlin Clark
Yeah,
obviously is a big reason. One of the reasons I think a lot of people think that women's sports don't do as well as men's sports is not only because it's not seen as much, and obviously you can't watch women's basketball all day, every day like you can with men's basketball, and I get that because the numbers aren't there. But that women need to show an interest in women's sports in order for it to be successful. I don't know what the numbers are, and if there's a woman out there right now who's a huge football fan, God bless you, that's great. But I think for the most part, there are more men's sports fans than women's sports fans.
yeah. I think
Uh,
there are more men who buy tickets to sporting events than there are women who buy tickets to sporting events, and so there's a few things there. Are men as a whole interested in it to support it enough, which is what you're getting at? And then the next question is, do they have the capacity to add another sport of interest? If I'm a man and I'm buying football tickets and basketball tickets and baseball tickets, do I have time to buy anything else? When would I go to this? I think it's a mix of a number of things. I think what you saw here at the BJCC at Legacy Arena was really good quality. And I think other people like you, when they went, saw it and went, I didn't
mhm.
know it was this good.
Yeah.
I didn't know the players were this talented, and there are some really talented players, and it's fun to watch. It is not a different game, but it kind of is from the men's. It's a
It
different
is.
game.
I got in this a pseudo. really close knockdown drag out with this woman that was sitting in front of me discussion. And I think she could feel where I was coming from because I wasn't like I was all in. I was there. I was there with my son Santo, and he did a women's bracket this year. For real. I mean, I'm
No,
like, you did a women's bracket? That's cool. And he's like, I thought you were going to give me hell about that. I said, no. I said, that's great. He loves doing brackets, so he did a women's bracket. So I noticed, particularly for Tennessee in the second game, they were missing everything.
yeah.
And a lot of those shots were within 2 to 3 feet of the bucket, and they were right underneath the basket or right to the side. You know that side shot that we all practice. We see how many we can make in a row, like 1,000 in a row. And the women they just kept missing it and kept missing it and kept missing it. And certainly when men do that, you either like just stuff the ball, and we don't see that with women very often because they can't jump as high. And I do know the ball is a little smaller. And their 3-point line is the same outside the WNBA, where it's a little different. It's another rule that a lot of people don't understand. But I came up with this idea, and tell me if I'm crazy, because I was trying to figure out why they kept missing that shot. And I realized that a lot of times, because of the height of the women, they're not as tall as men are. The basket's still 10 feet high. The trajectory of their shots is different. They do a lot of scooping. There's a lot of scooping in women's sports. If you watch women's sports, they do a lot of scooping. When men scoop, it looks like something out of the Harlem Globetrotters. It's super cool. When Seth, it's a scoop shot, it looks fantastic because we're normally shooting like this. We're shooting over the guys that are in the post or in the paint. Women can't do that. And that's why you see a lot more block shots in women's basketball. And when you do see block shots, it comes right back at the player. It comes down in their face, because if you got some 6'11" lurch woman in the paint, it ain't getting near her because you're right underneath her. You can't possibly out jump her. And so you're doing the scoop shot. And so, like we do with free throws, guys who throw it between their legs, the trajectory of the ball makes it bounce off the rim and the backboard differently than if it does if you shoot it above your head. And
Okay.
it doesn't bounce the same way.
All
And
right.
so because of that, and if you'll watch this, and so I'm having this discussion, and this woman's wanting to blow me up because she's like, oh, this some dude doesn't know what the hell he's talking about women's basketball. And I said, no, am I wrong here? Because we started watching, we started talking. She goes, you know what? You're kind of right. They do scoop the ball a lot more. And I could see the trajectory of the ball is going up instead of over. And because of that, it doesn't go in as often. And I said, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure. It may have just been a really bad shooting day for Tennessee. I mean, they were
Yeah.
shooting like
I think it was.
yeah.
I think it was that. I saw a little bit of that game. You talking about the game against Texas?
Yes. I mean,
Yeah, it wasn't good.
yeah,
It
and
wasn't
they
good.
they could not hit
And
a
Texas is good.
yeah, but they also could hit a 3-pointer to save their life, and
Yeah.
Tennessee obviously prizes for that. So I thought that was interesting, but great for women's sports. And kudos to whoever it was down at the BJCC that put that thing together and saw the foresight 2 or 3 years ago to say, listen, we need to start putting in bids for stuff like this. So we get the chance to watch that more, because I do think we do a great job here, and we're talked about all the time as we couldn't possibly have a professional team because we'd never support it, and we support everything that comes in here. It's just that everything we usually support falls apart. That's why the USFL is doing so well here. I mean, the
Yeah.
Stallions doing wonderful. They're winning championships because we have it every year. It's
Yeah.
not happening for one year, and the next year it's falling apart. And so eventually, if you stick with something long enough, you will get a fan base, and you will get some lovers and some P1s that support that. So there you have it.
Yeah.
All right. He is Mark Ingram, UABsports.com, UABsports.com. You can check out everything they got on their website right there, info at TonyCurryRadio.net. Of course, you can hear the show throughout the week. Since it is getting April time, we got a little downtime before we get into some college football. So I want to start getting out some classic rock news. Recently, there was a great article. I forget where I read it. It wasn't March Madness. It was March Dadness. And what it was a bracket of the best classic rock bands according to when you were born.
Ooh.
So, for example, Boomer Dads, they
Okay.
had four bands, and it was just a Sweet 16 kind of thing they did, and then they had to competing against each other to find out who was going to win it all. The Boomer bands were the Beatles, the Eagles, Zeppelin, and the Stones. Then you had the Gen X bands. You had Aerosmith, AC/DC, Van Halen, and Guns N' Roses. And then you had the Millennials,
Okay.
which was Linkin Park, Nirvana, Limp Bizkit, and Blink 182. and they basically took on each other. It was kind of neat. And of course, it was done by an online survey of 150,000 people, blah, 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 blah. And
Yeah.
I want to say that it came down. I think that the winning band, I think, was Guns N' Roses, and I think it was over. No, I'm sorry. It was Metallica. Metallica was also in that mix. There was another part. Metallica ended up winning the whole thing by a landslide. Anyway, as the greatest dad band of all time. So I wanted to ask you, how old are you?
I'm 51.
Okay, I'm 59. I can't believe I'm 8 years older than you are. Um, you look great for 51. Um, so I started thinking to myself, what bands do you remember listening to that you really got into when you were,
Like little.
well, a teenager? I'm
I,
gonna I'm gonna say 13 to 18. Like, can you remember the bands that you used to
oh
listen?
yeah. Yeah, we talk about all the time. It's Van Halen, it's Quiet Riot, it's Guns N' Roses. Yeah, these guys were that's all I listened to. But like I remember when I was little, like my first memories of music are people like the Eagles. I remember vividly listening to an album that my dad had of the Eagles just over and over again. And I was, kindergarten.
Hmm.
Yeah, I remember that really
Was,
well.
was there ever a band that you really, really liked that no one else could understand why you liked them so much?
Well, we've talked about this before. My dad was in the radio business, and so he and two other guys had 9 radio stations, which was a wide variety. It was country, rock, but they also had a station that we don't even nobody has anymore called Oldies.
Uh-huh.
It was sort of that um, the Four Tops and Four Seasons and the Temptations, a lot of Motown. And so stuff like that I loved and nobody liked it. Nobody liked it that I was friends with. Everybody's like, that is the oldest, stupidest music. Why do you like that? I just did.
Yeah.
My dad liked it. It was my parents' era of music. So they liked it. They listened to it. There's a whole segment of music that's referred to as Carolina beach music,
Uh-huh.
and that was really popular in our house. And it was uh, the Tams and is it the Emeralds or something? There was that's bothering me now. But there was a whole segment of music though that was really popular in the North Carolinas, South Carolina area on the coast that was just it's what you listen to.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there was a ton of music like that nobody else listened
So,
to.
so my dad was a newspaper distributor, and I never realized this until like just recently, which is really kind of crazy, because it was there in my face all the time. My dad had a radio on 24 hours a day. I didn't even think about it. He had a radio in his office. We had a small little office downstairs where he did his bookkeeping. Then, of course, out in the garage was where he stuffed the newspapers. We'd have stuffed newspapers at least 3 or 4 days a week, and I'd help out with that. I'd get paid a dime or a nickel for every 100 I did. Um, and no matter how cold it was or how hot it was, we were out in that garage. And we had a radio. And then in the bathroom, we had this bathroom called the White Bathroom. It was a bathroom that was added on to the house after I was born. A really small bathroom, and he had a radio that he actually had it nailed up to the side of the um, basin where the sink was. It was wooden, and he had it nailed up there, and it was plugged in, so we never had to worry. So it was always he always had that radio, and so I remember my dad every night at 12:30 we get up to go to work because he'd have to go down to Sharonville to pick up the newspapers at 1 o'clock in the morning and deliver. He'd get home about 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, and I remember he'd go in there and he'd go sit on the pot and turn the radio on and listen to 700 WLW. And so I listened to this, and you know about that radio station because you have family, extended
Yeah.
family in Cincinnati. And I used to listen to that all the time. They had Bozo at night. They had a truckers thing. They used to do truckers. So it wasn't really top 40. I didn't listen to a lot of top 40 music on WSAI, but that was back, and this is probably before your, I can't believe I'm saying before your time. I can't believe we're having this discussion, but it was before your time because I didn't have FM yet. We did have FM like midway through my uh, teenage years, but I remember listening to WSAI 1640 AM on AM radio before FM got really, really big. You only had an AM transistor radio. You could only listen to AM on a transistor radio, and you used to be able to listen to music. People were like, yeah, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, we can get music in stereo, really? Because
Right.
FM was stereo, AM was not, and you could hear it under a bridge because the amplitude modulation goes like this,
Yeah.
and the frequency goes like this. That's why when you
Mhm.
go under a bridge, no one's probably. I would venture to guess that if we have 6,000 people listening right now, there may be one or two that even knows what AM is.
No, they don't even know
Um,
what it is.
but it was so amazing because that kind of it forms your life. It's I was listening to I heard a Linda Ronstadt song this morning on 70s at 7 that I hadn't heard Blue
Don't
by
it make
You
your brown eyes blue?
Blue by well I was this is Blue by You and I was like, well, I hadn't heard that in a long time. And even if the song sucks, like the Carpenter sounds good once in a while because you just haven't heard it in 50 or 60 years. It's
Yeah.
like, wow, that song used to be so good. And so that's where I kind of got out the idea, and I was wondering because I was also big into the CYOC, the Catholic Youth Organization,
Hmm.
and we're not sitting in a wagon circle down at St. Francis downtown singing Def Leppard music. I mean,
No,
we
you're
were we,
not.
we were doing James Taylor, we were doing England Ann and John Ford Coley, we were doing Seals and Crofts. We were singing all this really, Love is the Answer,
Right.
John Denver. So I was into a lot of that stuff, even though I was working at classic rock station in high school at WLHS when I was 14 years old. I remember for some reason the Greg Kinn band was always big. I remember really getting into Devo. And maybe that was what MTV was 1981, 82 when it first
Yeah,
started.
whip
So
it,
I was,
man.
yeah. Uh,
Yeah, I was in that something, 80,
but
82.
I remember Whip It, but I remember going and listening to We Are We Not Men and some of their other stuff because MTV brought that on.
Everything else was terrible.
Yeah, well, think about how many great bands there were on MTV that didn't make it on to terrestrial radio. You didn't
Hmm.
you didn't really hear Whip It on. There were some songs and some videos on MTV that were MTV. The Buggles, Radio Killed the Video or the Video Killed the Radio Star. That
The
was a
video
huge
killed the radio
song on
star.
MTV, but it wasn't a big song on radio.
Yeah, I want
Um,
candy. Yeah.
and then I'm trying to think to myself, was I influenced by the people I hung out with? Because you and I have had this discussion. You got your Van Halen people, you got your people like you that were into the classic rock thing, you got your soft music kind of people. Then you had your people that were into Rush, that were into the really early Genesis kind of
Yeah.
weird people. And then you
Yeah.
had then you had your goth people that were into Iron Maiden
Yeah.
and maybe some Ronnie James Dio and stuff.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah, those people scared me, and I love that music now, but
yeah,
at the
and that,
time
and
they scared me.
yeah, it did. Well, the people that listened to it scared me.
Right. That's what I
Those are
mean.
not the people. They were smokers. We used to have in case you don't know, there used to be a smoking pit. Actually, you used to be able to smoke cigarettes in high school, which was unbelievable. I can't believe we actually had that.
That's crazy.
But then there was also that group of people that were into that really weird Adam and the Ants, Devo,
Yeah.
geeky stuff that was just like makeup, and I don't even know where you put the
A lot of
kids and
hairspray.
stuff. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. It made me think about something, and I kept trying to think, and I, a lot of it had to do with my dad because 700 WLW was news talk, but they did play music, and so I can remember them playing like The Gambler from Kenny Rogers, some of those early 70s and 80s songs. I don't even know how they picked their music, and then they had
There was a window when Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton owned everything. They
oh yeah.
were the only thing you heard on the radio. They were both in a ton of movies.
Mhm.
9 to 5, for Dolly, that. And
Yep.
there was a right. I don't know how long it was, but it felt like in my mind, it's 10 years. There was a decade where it was those two were the most popular
Yeah, and,
on
and, what, and
television.
what I didn't realize too is that Kenny did a lot of collaboration with the Commodores, with Lionel Richie.
Lionel Richie.
Lionel Richie wrote a lot of stuff for Kenny, and Kenny wrote a lot of stuff for Lionel Richie. And I never realized that they had this their entire lives. They'd worked this collaboration, and obviously the Dolly Parton stuff, Islands in the Stream and stuff. Yes, but it's just interesting. It's fun to go back and listen to some of that music, and maybe because I was listening to some of that 70s stuff earlier today, I was kind of like, wow, that just kind of takes me back, and it just reminds you of some really strange times, and why we are who we are. Because
Yeah.
I was a classic rock guy for 30 years, and I didn't even, and I think that's why my brother used to think I was so uncool. My brother was not. My brother was smoking dope, racing cars, chasing women. I mean, he did everything, and to this day, he's my best friend. He learned his lesson. He was one of those guys that could not get away with anything. If he did something wrong, he was going to get in trouble for it. He got me in trouble for a lot of things.
Yeah.
He would put a lot of things off of me, and my mom would go, I know it wasn't you, honey. I know Jeff did this. So, yeah, I'll never forget when he accidentally put his Playboy magazine in my underwear drawer instead of his, and I found it. And of course, I shouldn't have said anything. I should, because I knew it was his. But of course, I went to my mom and said, "Hey, I found this in my drawer." And of course, my brother got, the belt came off. So yeah, but it was just fun to kind of go back and collaborate and think about the stuff. All right, my man. Thank you for everything you do. Appreciate you, and we'll catch up next week. And if you've got any ideas of where you want to go, or anyone listening to us right now, maybe some of your favorite AM moments. It's just radio was just it was such a huge part of our lives. And
Yeah.
it's just not like that now. Now you can kind of listen to whatever you want, wherever you go. And I saw something the other day, radio listenership is off 75% from 10 years ago. Isn't that crazy? 75%. I mean, there's just so many different things
I'm
to
not
listen to.
surprised.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. I think that what's happened is with people who have music on their phone, Apple Music, Spotify, this sort of thing, they just listen to what they want to listen to. It's commercial free, and they listen to what they want to listen to. And
I did something really, really cool on Fox 6 this past Monday. 76 years ago, last Monday, 1949, RCA released the first 45.
huh,
Now, do you remember, do you know when the first 33 and a third record came out? That was 1949 when the 45 came out. Do you know when the first 33 came out?
well, I don't. Is it in the 60s?
It was 1948. It was the year before the 45 came out,
Really?
but there was nothing to play it on. I mean, you had the commercial turntables and stuff, but they didn't sell turntables. You didn't have turntables, and so you couldn't do that. And then, of course, the 8-track came out, and I actually had an 8-track of Bobby Sherman, of all things. The 8-track and the cassette tape came out in the mid 60s at about the same time. And then the CD came out in the early 80s. And I'll leave you with this little trivia here. The first music album recorded and released on a CD was
You got me, man. I don't know.
Billy Joel, 52nd Street.
Billy Joel.
So now you have a little piece of trivia. There you go.
There you have it.
There you go. I could talk for hours about this stuff. I love you, man. I appreciate you. I'll talk next week.
All right, Tony. See you, pal.
Thanks, Boo.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.